Happy Friday! Wah! Wah! I don't know why I'm yelling. Here's a cute puppy. Oh, he's sitting up and staring. Wah! Oh, what? Oh, what? Where are you going? Did I disturb you? Disturbing the pup? How dare? I didn't mean to. What a cutie, isn't he? I'm watching over here at the screen to make sure that he's visible to everybody. That's all I got. Oh, Gesundheit. Oh, sneezy puppy. Friday, Friday, May 6th. Does it feel like May 6th? We're already in the month of May. Not even the first of. Does it feel like May 6th? Hey, Sharkies. How's it going? Happy Friday. Happy May 6th. The 6th. Pharma says, May 6th is the glorious 6th of May, I believe, in Ankh-Morpork. I have news for you. May 6th is the glorious 6th of May everywhere. Is it the 6th? For some reason I thought maybe it was like the 12th or something. Maybe it's the 6th. That was an interesting book. I wonder if we'll get to that one. Because that was like the fourth or third or fourth guards book, something like that. Come on, Dino. You had this before. Yeah. I think that was not the second guards book. The 25th of May. Well, I was closer without going over, so I think I win. Oh, puppy's going. Night Watch? Ah, yes, of course, that would be Night Watch. Yeah. Which guards book is that, though? Is that like... It is the 6th guards book. Sharky say, last night the algorithm gods recommended to me a video from Penguin Random House about the Discworld audiobooks. And now you're excited about them. Yeah, I've been seeing a lot of stuff about this new run of audiobooks for Discworld they're doing with like Andy Serkis and Bill Nighy. I think Bill Nighy is the voice of the footnotes. And Andy Serkis is maybe the narrator. Maybe. And then a few other names that I'm less familiar with. But yeah, quite the all-star cast it looked like. I just hope that I don't end up getting in trouble as a result for reading some, because I know they're doing the Witches books through this audiobooks run, and I hope they don't find my little channel and shut us down, or, stop us from reading Pratchett. Ah, I see. Andy Serkis is just reading Small Gods. Gotcha. Um, I'm hoping, because we're doing, like, I'm not just reading the books to everybody. It's like we're reading and discussing them, and I'm hoping that the discussion part of it makes it okay, because I think there was something to do with that. I'm not. I don't know copyright law and all that. Um, but I'm hoping it's the fact that we're doing this as sort of a group, talking about what we're reading, that makes it okay. So, at the very least, the discussion will disrupt the algorithm. Mm-hmm. I guess there's that. Maybe. I don't know. Algorithms are. I don't know if computers care about that. So tonight's stream, I'm gonna go to probably no later. I'm gonna try to be done by 8:45 at the latest. Depending on how this goes and everything. But I'm not going to go later than 8:45 because we've got tickets to Doctor Strange tonight, and so we're gonna have to head out pretty much right after I'm done here. So just as a heads up, I will be watching the clock a little bit, because sometimes on Fridays we go a bit later. But that's my plan for today. Yeah. Any plans for the weekend, anybody? Is anybody doing anything on Sunday, perhaps, for a certain celebration of mothers? We're going to be going out to visit my mom, who sadly has not been in the best of health recently. So that's been something kind of omnipresent in my mind. But I think we're going to do a little. Apparently, I just found out that there's going to be like a little barbecue there on Sunday. We were going to go anyways, but I guess bonus. My family loves doing barbecues for any occasion. Always has. Probably more so in the past. When I was younger, like my whole family, because there's a lot of my family out towards Chilliwack, cousins and aunts and uncles, and just, yeah. And when I was younger, when I was a kid, it would be like every month the whole family would get together for like a big barbecue to celebrate everybody's birthdays that happened in that month. So lots and lots of family barbecues. Sharky say, celebrating Mister's father's 80th birthday on Sunday. Usually takes the thunder away from Mother's Day, but then again, his mom's birthday is around Father's Day, so there's a bit of a trade-off. 80. Big 8-0. Hang on. I don't know. I don't know what I was trying to look up there. But yeah, absolutely. Happy birthday to Sharky Senior. Unfortunately, you're going to the birthday boy's favorite restaurant in Chilliwack. The Mandarin Garden. Is that place still open? Oh boy. I feel like I haven't been there in like 20 years. Mandarin Garden. Oh. Ugh. Yeah, my dad also quite liked the Mandarin Garden. Um is it the same as it ever was? Unfortunately. Oh boy. Oh wow. It's been like 20 years, but I can still very vividly remember that place and its plastic cups and plates and sneeze guards. Maybe it hasn't been 20. Maybe I went there once more recently than that. Maybe I went there once like 10 years ago or something. Maybe. I'm not sure about that. There is a possibility that I went there once with some SCA people. It was better than Happy Valley. Hmm. I don't think I'm familiar with Happy Valley. And then yeah, like Farmo said, we are seeing another play on Saturday. That the last one that we saw, Farmos's dad was directing, and then the one that we're seeing on Saturday, her mom is acting in. And I have no idea in what kind of role. The play that we're seeing on Saturday is called Marjorie Prime, um, which, from what I have been able to tell without looking too deeply into it, is about. I think it's about memory, maybe, about how people's memories are flawed, and you might think you remember something perfectly well, but you're mistaken. That may not be how it actually happened. Um, and it also could be tied in with like technology, but I'm not certain about that. How this play is going to go. That's maybe the theme. And I don't know what role Farmos's mom is playing. Farmos says we get a bit spoiled for Chinese food out here. Yeah, yeah. Apparently, Richmond has what is known as the best Chinese food, authentic Chinese food in North America. So I have heard it claimed. Um, yeah, we don't actually get. I mean, we get like Taiwanese food pretty frequently, but we don't go for like Chinese food that often. There is a really good place um, near the rich near one of the malls, or technically, I think it's actually in one of the malls, but it's like a full restaurant. Um, but yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure if it's Mandarin Garden's fault or not, but I'm not really the biggest sort of North American Chinese food fan. Um, Sometimes it's okay, but it's never really like ever my first choice. Um, but there are some good places out here, definitely. And I mean, you know, um, I go to Kung Fu, and pre-COVID, there would be these annual banquets we would go to, where basically a whole pile of kung fu schools from this area would all get together for a banquet at Flota Restaurant, and so there would be multiple courses served, and then kung fu demonstrations and things like that in the restaurant, and lion dances and things. Um, and yeah, some of that was very good. Some of it caught me by surprise once or twice. Um, for example, this one dish came up because basically we would all be sitting around a table for our school. Sometimes we'd have a couple of tables, and then food would come out and get put in the center of the table, which on like a sort of lazy Susan style spinning dolly, and you would take food from that and eat, and then the next course would come out, sort of thing, right? Um, and there was this one like plate platter that came out that had like, I don't know, some stuff around the outside, maybe some duck or something like that, and then these like clear noodles in the center, and I'm like, oh, I love noodles, so I grabbed some of those, and I take a bite of those, and they were not noodles. They were shredded jellyfish. Um, which maybe wouldn't have been so bad if I had been expecting shredded jellyfish. Of course, I was not. I was thinking they were noodles. They looked like a variant of like vermicelli, some kind of like glass noodle or rice noodle or something. But it was shredded jellyfish. I feel like it was crunchy isn't the right word because they weren't crunchy, but they had that sort of texture where something is like chewy but then gives in kind of like a crunchy. I don't know how to describe it. I don't know what I would compare it to. Yeah. Of course, Farmos is immediately talking about red bean soup. All right. How about this book? We're getting into it now. It looks like we're probably about a quarter of the way through. Maybe even slightly more than a quarter. What are we? We're at page 84-ish out of... I just noticed that there's a crossword in the back of this book. What? Yeah, there's a crossword puzzle. um, there's a surprising amount in the back of this book. There's like a list of characters. There's a few pages of stuff in the back. We're on page 84-ish out of 264 to 65. Yeah, we've got some good pho places near here as well. There's this one place at Market Crossing called Little Min's that has this satay pho. So it's like a spicy peanut sauce, kind of. Um, that's very good. I really like that. Plus, they've got bubble tea. We frequently will get like pho plus mocha bubble tea with coffee jelly. Of course, Farmos is also talking about it. Yeah, that's the place we order pho from the most frequently. Yeah. So, since I do technically have a time limit today, um, on Wednesday, the our coven of witches summoned up a demon and asked it what the heck was going on in almost exactly those words. And learned that what the heck was going on was that the kingdom itself was not happy about its lack of a king that cared for it. Um, I think probably primarily because Duke Felmet, who is still, as far as I can tell, still Duke Felmet and not technically officially King Felmet, but either way, nominally in charge and basically despises the place, right? And then Granny had a little conversation, sort of. I don't know if you can call it a conversation when the other side doesn't participate, but all those animals out in front of her house just staring, and she went out and tried to defend herself a bit. And then we learned a little bit about how young Tom John is doing now that he's like 3 years old. Apparently, we've been passing a little bit more time than I thought. I thought it was maybe like a year and a half at this point, but I think they said he was 3. I'm just seeing if I can double check that. Ah, he was nearly 3 years old, is what they said. So I guess it's not quite 3 years past. Plus, he was not 0 when we first encountered Tom John, right? He would have been months old or maybe a year. I don't actually know. I also really like lemongrass chicken and vermicelli. I believe I have had lemongrass chicken and vermicelli within the past week or so. Sadly, I didn't have any like sriracha to go with it. Well, now that I'm thinking of it, I could have. There is some that I could have put on it, or chili oil. It was still good though. We tried a different place for it, and it was still good. I think it's kind of hard to go wrong with lemongrass chicken and vermicelli. And yes, Binnabic loves bean sprouts. Mr. just ate, but would totally go for lemongrass chicken with chili oil. Mm-hmm. Yeah, our schedule tonight means we're seeing Doctor Strange at the VIP theater, and so they've got food service there. So we're probably going to be eating at the movie. Oh, there's a dog barking outside, and Binnabic has heard. Oh, oh boy. Boy, puppy's really yappy outside. Um, yeah. So, young Tom John remembers all the words, and we learned what that meant. Means he's gonna be real good in theater. Your son has declaimed his first word. All right, I'm gonna get into it. If that sounds good, I'm gonna start reading this book. It's 7:24, so we've got an hour and 20 minutes to go. Page 85. I am at the very top of page 85 because we finished off page 84 last time. All right. Spring came, and ex-King Verence still wasn't taking being dead lying down. That's a good line. He prowled the castle relentlessly, seeking for a way in which its ancient stones would release their grip on him. He was also trying to keep out of the way of the other ghosts. Ghosts plural. Champot was all right, if a bit tiresome. But Verence had backed away at the first sight of the twins. toddling hand in hand along the midnight corridors, their tiny ghosts a memorial to a deed darker even than the usual run of regicidal unpleasantness. Ew, that's nasty. Sharkies imagine a kingdom like that would have a bunch of ghosts. Seems so. And then there was the Troglodyte Wanderer. Sounds like a wrestling name. Ladies and gentlemen, the Troglodyte Wanderer! That was pretty good, wasn't it? Sharkies wonder if those twins are a subtle Shining reference. Then there was the Troglodyte Wanderer, a rather faded monkey man in a furry loincloth who apparently happened to haunt the castle merely because it had been built on his burial mound. For no obvious reason, a chariot with a screaming woman in it occasionally rumbled through the laundry room. As for the kitchen, one day he'd given in, despite everything old Champot had said, and followed the smells of cooking into the big, hot, high-domed cavern that served the castle as kitchen and abattoir. Funny thing, that. He'd never been down there since his childhood. Somehow, kings and kitchens didn't go well together. It was full of ghosts. But they weren't human. They weren't even proto-human. They were stags. They were bullocks. They were rabbits and pheasants and partridges and sheep and pigs. There were even some round, blobby things that looked unpleasantly like the ghosts of oysters. They were packed so tightly that, in fact, they merged and mingled, turning the kitchen into a silent, jostling nightmare of teeth and fur and horns, half seen and misty. Several noticed him, and there was a weird blarting of noises that sounded far off, tinny, and unpleasantly out of register. Through them all, the cook and his assistants wandered quite unconcernedly, making vegetarian sausages. Making vegetarian sausages. Farmer says that's very unpleasant. A weird blarting of noises. Varence had stared for half a minute and then fled, wishing that he still had a real stomach so that he could stick his fingers down his throat for 40 years and bring up everything he'd eaten. He'd sought solace in the stables, where his beloved hunting dogs had whined and scratched at the door, and had generally been very ill at ease at his sensed but unseen presence. Now he haunted, and how he hated the word, the long gallery, where paintings of long-dead kings looked down at him from the dusty shadows. He would have felt a lot more kindly toward them if he hadn't met a number of them gibbering in various parts of the premises. Sharkies wonder what those animals' unfinished business is. Coronary, right? Revenge? Coronary? Varence had decided that he had two aims in death. One was to get out of the castle and find his son, and the other was to get his revenge on the Duke. Coronary, okay. But not by killing him, he'd decided, even if he could find a way, because an eternity in that giggling idiot's company would lend a new terror to death. He sat under a painting of Queen Bemery, 670 to 722, whose rather stern good looks he would have felt a whole lot happier about if he hadn't seen her earlier that morning walking through the wall. Varence tried to avoid walking through walls. A man had his dignity. He became aware that he was being watched. He turned his head. There was a cat sitting in the doorway, subjecting him to a slow blink. It was mottled gray and extremely fat. No, it was extremely big. It was covered with so much scar tissue that it looked like a fist with fur on it. Its ears were a couple of perforated stubs, its eyes 2 yellow slits of easy-going malevolence, its tail a twitching series of question marks as it stared at him. I feel like that's more description than some protagonists get in some books. Like, your main character might not get described that thoroughly. Also, I like its tail, a twitching series of question marks. That's good. Grebo had heard that Lady Felmet had a small white female cat and had strolled up to pay his respects. Does Grebo... I thought Grebo was missing an eye. This says its eye's 2 yellow slits. I thought for some reason Grebo only had one eye. Varence had never seen an animal with so much built-in villainy. He didn't resist as it waddled across the floor and tried to rub itself against his legs, purring like a waterfall. Farmo says Grebo only has one in Masquerade. Well, well, said the king, vaguely. He reached down and made an effort to scratch it behind the 2 ragged bits on top of its head. It was a relief to find someone else besides another ghost who could see him, and Grebo, he couldn't help feeling, was a distinctly unusual cat. Most of the castle cats were either pampered pets or flat-eared kitchen and stable habitués, who generally resembled the very rodents they lived on. This cat, on the other hand, was its own animal. All cats give that impression, of course, but instead of the mindless animal self-absorption that passes for secret wisdom in the creatures, Grebo radiated genuine intelligence. He also radiated a smell that would have knocked over a wall and caused sinus trouble in a dead fox. Only one type of person kept a cat like this. The king tried to hunker down and found he was sinking slightly into the floor. He pulled himself together and drifted upward. Once a man allowed himself to go native in the ethereal world, there would be no hope for him, he felt. Only close relatives and the psychically inclined, Death had said. There weren't many of either in the castle. The Duke qualified under the first heading, but his relentless self-interest made him about as psychically useful as a carrot. As for the rest, only the cook and the fool seemed to qualify, but the cook spent a lot of his time weeping in the pantry because he wasn't being allowed to roast anything more bloody than a parsnip. I see. That's why the vegetarian sausages, apparently. And the fool was already such a bundle of nerves that Verence had given up his attempts to get through. A witch, now. If a witch wasn't psychically inclined, then he, King Verence, was a puff of wind. He had to get a witch into the castle. And then he'd got a plan. In fact, it was more than that. It was a plan. The first one did not have a capital P. The second time it did have a capital P in plan. In case my enunciation did not get that across. Farmo says, I think earlier the Duke asked for vegetarian things. That sounds right. He spent months over it. He hadn't got anything else to do, except think. Death had been right about that. My enunciation did get the plan, capital P, across. That's good. Death had been right about that. All that ghosts had were thoughts. And although thoughts in general had always been alien to the king, the absence of any body to distract him with its assorted humors had actually given him the chance to savor the joys of cerebration. Cerebration? He'd never had a plan before, or at least one that went much further than, let's find something and kill it. And here, sitting in front of him, washing itself, was the key. Here, pussy, he ventured. Grebo gave him a penetrating yellow stare. Cat, the king amended hastily, and backed away, beckoning. For a moment, it seemed that the cat wouldn't follow, and then, to his relief, Grebo stood up, yawned, and padded toward him. Grebo didn't often see ghosts, and was vaguely interested in this tall, bearded man with the see-through body. The king led him along a dusty side corridor and toward a lumber room crammed with crumbling crumbling tapestries and portraits of long-dead kings. Grebo examined it critically and then sat down in the middle of the dusty floor, looking at the king expectantly. There's plenty of mice and things in here, do you see? Said Verence. And the rain blows in through the broken window. Plus, there's all these tapestries to sleep on. Sorry, the king added, and turned to the door. This was what he had been working on all these months. When he was alive, he had always taken a lot of care of his body. And since being dead, he had taken care to preserve its shape. It was easy to let yourself go and become all fuzzy around the edges. There were ghosts in the castle who were mere pale blobs. But Verence had wielded iron self-control and exercised. Well, had thought hard about exercise, and fairly bulged with spectral muscles. Months of pumping ectoplasm had left him in better shape than he had ever been, apart from being dead. Then, He'd started out small, with dust motes. The first one had nearly killed him. Footnote, in a manner of speaking. End of footnote. But he'd persevered and progressed to sand grains, then whole dried peas. He still didn't dare venture into the kitchens, but he had amused himself by oversalting Felmet's food a pinch at a time until he pulled himself together and told himself that poisoning wasn't honorable, even against vermin. Nice. Now he leaned all his weight on the door, and with every microgram of his being forced himself to become as heavy as possible. The sweat of autosuggestion dripped off his nose and vanished before it hit the floor. Pharma says there was a thing earlier where the Duke was talking about his food being too salty. Nice. Grebo watched with interest as ghostly muscles moved on the king's arms like footballs mating. The word was broken up on 2 lines by a dash, so it took me a second to... like, footballs mating. Muscles moved on the king's arms like footballs mating. Like, obviously the answer to the question I'm about to ask is Terry Pratchett, but who thinks of that? Like... Sharky say, the crazy thing is, I can picture what he means. You got a mental image there? The door began to move, creaked, then accelerated and hit the doorway with a thump. The latch clicked into place. Creaked is a good word. Creaked is one of those onomatopoeic words, I feel like, you know? It sounds like what it means. It sounds like its definition. Is Farmos about to come in here with the correct word for that? Yep, you have no doubt what the sound was like. The latch clicked into place. It bloody well had to work now, Varence told himself. He'd never be able to lift the latch by himself. But a witch would certainly come looking for her cat, wouldn't she? In the hills beyond the castle, the fool lay on his stomach and stared into the depths of a little lake. A couple of trout stared back at him. Somewhere on the disk, reason told him, there must be someone more miserable than he was. He wondered who it was. He hadn't asked to be a fool, but it wouldn't have mattered if he had, because he couldn't recall anyone in his family ever listening to anything he said after Dad ran away. Certainly not Granddad. His earliest memory was of Granddad standing over him, making him repeat the jokes by rote, and hammering home every punchline with his belt. It was thick leather, and the fact that it had bells on didn't improve things much. What a thing to be strict about, huh? Grandad was credited with 7 official new jokes. He'd won the honorary cap and bells of the Grand Prix des Idiots Blithering. The Grand Prix des Idiots Blithering at Ankh-Morpork 4 years in a row, which no one else had ever done. And presumably they made him the funniest man who ever lived. He had worked hard at it, you had to give him that. The fool recalled with a shudder how, at the age of 6, he'd timidly approached the old man after supper with a joke he'd made up. It was about a duck. It had earned him the biggest thrashing of his life, which even then must have presented the old joker with a bit of a challenge. "You will learn, my lad," he recalled, with every sentence punctuated by jingling cracks, "that there is nothing more serious than jesting. From now on, you will never," the old man paused to change hands, "never, never, ever utter a joke that has not been approved by the guild. Who are you to decide what is amusing? Marry, let the untutored giggle at unskilled banter. It is the laughter of the ignorant. Never, never, never let me catch you joculating again." After that, he'd gone back to learning the 383 guild-approved jokes, which was bad enough, and the glossary, which was a lot bigger and much worse. And then he'd been sent to Ankh, and there, in the bare, severe rooms, he'd found there were books other than the great, heavy, brass-bound Monster Fun book. There was a whole circular world out there, full of weird places and people doing interesting things, like singing. He could hear singing. He raised his head cautiously and jumped at the tinkle of the bells on his cap. He gripped the hated things hurriedly. The singing went on. The fool peeped cautiously through the drift of meadowsweet that was providing him with perfect concealment. That's what, like a +4 modifier? The singing wasn't particularly good. The only word the singer appeared to know was la, but she was making it work hard. The general tune gave the impression that the singer believed that people were supposed to sing la 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 in certain circumstances, and was determined to do what the world expected of her. The fool risked raising his head a little further, and saw Magrat for the first time, because of course it's Magrat. She had stopped dancing, rather self-consciously, through the narrow meadow, and was trying to plait some daisies in her hair, without much success. The fool held his breath. On long nights on the hard flagstones, he had dreamed of women like her. Although, if he really thought about it, not much like her. They were better endowed around the chest, their noses weren't so red and pointed, and their hair tended to flow more. But the fool's libido was bright enough to tell the difference between the impossible and the conceivably attainable, and hurriedly cut in some filter circuits. Magrat was picking flowers and talking to them. The fool strained to hear. "Here's woolly fellwort," she said, and treacle worm seed, which is for inflammation of the ears. Even Nanny Ogg, who took a fairly cheerful view of the world, would have been hard put to say anything complimentary about Magrat's voice. But it fell on the fool's ears like blossom. And 5-leaved false mandrake, sovereign against fluxes of the bladder. And here's old man's frog bit, that's for constipation. The fool stood up sheepishly in a carillon of jingles. Carillon. I'm guessing it's either carillon or carillon, but I don't know. Farmer says, not quite the Ophelia flower scene. That's for constipation. Good catch, though. Almost certainly a reference. Maybe, probably. To Magrat, it was as if the meadow, hitherto supporting nothing more hazardous than clouds of pale blue butterflies and a few self-employed bumblebees, had sprouted a large red and yellow demon. It was opening and shutting its mouth. It had 3 menacing horns. An urgent voice at the back of her mind said, "You should run away now, like a timid gazelle. This is the accepted action in these circumstances." Carillon, not carillon. Carillon, I see. Common sense intervened. In her most optimistic moments, Magrat would not have compared herself to a gazelle, timid or otherwise. Besides, it added, the basic snag about running away like a timid gazelle was that in all probability she would easily outdistance him. Said the apparition. Uncommon sense, which, despite Granny Weatherwax's general belief that Magrat was several sticks short of a bundle, she still had in sufficiency, pointed out that few demons tinkled pathetically and appeared to be quite so breathless. "Hallo?" she said. The fool's mind was also working hard. He was beginning to panic. Magrat shunned the traditional pointed hat as worn by the other witches, but she still held to one of the most fundamental rules of witchcraft. It's not much use being a witch unless you look like one. In her case, this meant lots of silver jewelry with octograms, bats, spiders, dragons, and other symbols of everyday mysticism. Magrat would have painted her fingernails black, except that she didn't think she would be able to face Granny's withering scorn. It was dawning on the fool that he had surprised a witch. "Whoops," he said, and turned to run for it. "Don't," Magrat began, but the fool was already pounding down the forest path that led back to the castle. Magrat stood and stared at the wilting posy in her hands. She ran her fingers through her hair, and a shower of wilted petals fell out. She felt that an important moment had been allowed to slip out of her grasp as fast as a greased pig in a narrow passageway. She felt an overpowering urge to curse. She knew a great many curses. Goody Whemper had been really imaginative in that department. Even the creatures of the forest used to go past her cottage at a dead run. She couldn't find a single one that fully expressed her feelings. "Oh, bugger," she said. "I was that close." Almost got it. It was a full moon again that night, and most unusually, all three witches arrived at the Standing Stone early. Sharky say, "I caught that one, but Mister took a second." All three witches arrived at the Standing Stone early. It was so embarrassed by this that it went and hid in some gorse bushes. Yay! "Grebo hasn't been home for 2 days," said Nanny Ogg as soon as she arrived. "It's not like him. I can't find him anywhere." "Cats can look after themselves," said Granny Weatherwax. "Countries can't. I have intelligence to report. Light the fire, Magrat." "Hmm?" "I said, light the fire, Magrat." "Hmm? Oh, yes." The two old women watched her drift vaguely across the moorland, tugging absently at dried-up whin clumps. W-H-I-N. Magrat seemed to have her mind on something. "Doesn't seem to be her normal self," said Nanny Ogg. "Yes, could be an improvement," said Granny shortly, and sat down on a rock. "She should have got it lit before we arrived. It's her job." "She means well," said Nanny Ogg, studying Magrat's back reflectively. That's another gorse name? Whin? Whin is another gorse. Oh, okay. So we've got furze bushes, gorse, and whin. It's funny because they just said that the monolith went and hid in some gorse bushes. So I think he's going out of his way to use as many different names for it as possible here. "I used to mean well when I was a girl, but that didn't stop the sharp end of Goody Filter's tongue. Youngest witch serves her time. You know how it is. We had it tougher, too. Look at her. Doesn't even wear the pointy hat. How's anyone going to know?" "You got something on your mind, Esme?" said Nanny. Granny nodded gloomily. "Had a visit yesterday," she said. "Me too." Despite her worries, Granny was slightly annoyed at this. "Who from?" she said. "The mayor of Lancre and a bunch of burghers. They're not happy about the king. I want a king they can trust." "I wouldn't trust any king a burgher could trust," said Granny. "Yes, but it's not good for anyone, all this taxing and killing folk. The new sergeant they've got is a keen man when it comes to setting fire to cottages, too. Old Varence used to do it too, mind, but, well—" I know. It was more personal," said Granny. "You felt he meant it. People like to feel they're valued." "This Felmet hates the kingdom," Nanny went on. "They all say it. They say when they go to talk to him, he just stares at them, and giggles and rubs his hand and twitches a bit. Granny scratched her chin. The old king used to shout at them and kick them out of the castle, mind. He used to say he didn't have time for shopkeepers and such, she added, with a note of personal approval. But he was always very gracious about it, said Nanny Og. And he... The kingdom is worried, said Granny. Yes, I already said. I didn't mean the people. I meant the kingdom. Granny explained. Nanny interrupted a few times with brief questions. It didn't occur to her to doubt anything she heard. Granny Weatherwax never made things up. Pharma saying, there's a character in Curse of Strahd who is called a Burgomaster. We can never remember this, and generally call him anything from Burgermaster to Burgomeister. Yeah, it sometimes also Burgermeister. That's happened a few times. It's weird. It's almost always wrong the first time when somebody says it. I remember anything from, yeah, I know. I mean, granted, I usually have it in writing somewhere, so. So, Granny Weatherwax never made things up. At the end of it, she said, well, hang on. Okay. Wow! There's a series of words here, and I had to figure out who's saying what. Sharkies have emailed MPs before and never hear anything back, so I kind of get not liking being ignored by officials. Yeah. Alright, so, well, I'm pretty sure. My feelings exactly. Fancy that! Quite so. And what did the animals do then? Went away. It had brought them there. It let them go. No one ate anyone else? Not where I saw. Funny thing. Right enough. Nanny Og stared at the setting sun. I don't reckon a lot of kingdoms do that sort of thing, she said. You saw the theatre. Kings and such are killing one another the whole time. Their kingdoms just make the best of it. How come this one takes offense all of a sudden? It's been here a long time, said Granny. So's everywhere, said Nanny, and added with the air of a lifetime student, everywhere's been where it is ever since it was first put there. It's called geography. That's just about land, said Granny. It's not the same as a kingdom. A kingdom is made up of all sorts of things. Ideas, loyalties, memories. It all sort of exists together. And then all these things create some kind of life. Not a body kind of life, more like a living idea, made up of everything that's alive and what they're thinking, and what the people before them thought. Magrat reappeared and began to lay the fire with the air of one in a trance. I can see you've been thinking about this a lot, said Nanny, speaking very slowly and carefully. That happens sometimes, where I read things one way and then it is explained that I read it wrong. And this kingdom wants a better king, is that it? No. That is, yes. Look. She leaned forward. It doesn't have the same kind of likes and dislikes as people, right? Nanny Og leaned back. Well, It wouldn't, would it? She ventured. It doesn't care if people are good or bad. I don't think it could even tell, any more than you could tell if an ant was a good ant. But it expects the king to care for it. Yes, but, said Nanny wretchedly. She was becoming a bit afraid of the gleam in Granny's eye. Lots of people have killed each other to become king of Lancre. They've done all kinds of murder. Don't matter, don't matter, said Granny, waving her arms. She started counting on her fingers. For why, she said. 1. Kings go around killing each other because it's all part of destiny and such and doesn't count as murder. And 2, they killed for the kingdom. That's the important bit. But this new man just wants the power. He hates the kingdom. It's a bit like a dog, really, said Magrat. Granny looked at her with her mouth open to frame some suitable retort, and then her face softened. Very much like, she said. A dog doesn't care if its master is good or bad, just so long as it likes the dog. Well, then, said Nanny, no one and nothing likes Felmet. What are we going to do about it? Nothing. You know we can't meddle. You saved that baby, said Nanny. That's not meddling. Have it your way, said Nanny. But maybe one day he'll come back. Destiny again. And you said we should hide the crown. It'll all come back. Mark my words. Hurry up with that tea, Magrat. What are you going to do about the burghers? Said Granny. I told them they'll have to sort it out themselves. Once we use magic, I said, it'd never stop. You know that. Right, said Granny, but there was a hint of wistfulness in her voice. I'll tell you this, though, said Nanny. They didn't like it much. They was muttering when they left. Magrat blurted out, You know the fool who lives up at the castle? Little man with runny eyes, said Nanny, relieved that the conversation had returned to more normal matters. Not that little, said Magrat. What's his name? Do you happen to know? He's just called Fool, said Granny. No job for a man, that. Running around with bells on. His mother was a beldame, from over Blackglass way, said Nanny Ogg, whose knowledge of the genealogy of Lancre was legendary. Bit of a beauty when she was younger. Broke many a heart, she did. Bit of a scandal there, I did hear. Granny's right, though. At the end of the day, a fool's a fool. Why do you want to know, Magrat? Said Granny Weatherwax. Oh, one of the girls in the village was asking me, said Magrat, crimson to the ears. Nanny cleared her throat and grinned at Granny Weatherwax, who sniffed aloofly. It's a steady job, said Nanny. I'll grant you that. Ha, said Granny. A man who tinkles all day. No kind of husband for anyone, I'd say. She'd always know where he was, said Nanny, who was enjoying this. You'd just have to listen. Never trust a man with horns on his hat, said Granny flatly. Magrat stood up and pulled herself together, giving the impression that some bits had to come quite a long way. You're a pair of silly old women, she said quietly, and I'm going home. She marched off down the path to her village without another word. The old witches stared at one another. Well, said Nanny. It's all these books they read today, said Granny. It overheats the brain. You haven't been putting ideas in her head, have you? Right, book reading. Huh. Pfft. I think not. Not in these parts. Books. Psh. Books. Well, I never. Now then, back to the book. What do you mean? You know what I mean. Nanny stood up. I certainly don't see why a girl should have to be single her whole life just because you think it's the right thing, she said. Anyway, if people didn't have children, where would we be? None of your girls is a witch, said Granny, also standing up. They could have been, said Nanny defensively. Yes, if you'd let them work it out for themselves, instead of encouraging them to throw themselves at men. They're good-looking. You can't stand in the way of human nature. You'd know that if you'd ever. If I'd ever what? Said Granny Weatherwax quietly. They stared at one another in shocked silence. They could both feel it, the tension creeping into their bodies from the ground itself, the hot, aching feeling that they'd started something they must finish, no matter what. I knew you when you were a girl, said Nanny sullenly. Stuck up, you were. At least I spent most of the time upright, said Granny. Disgusting, that was. Everyone thought so. How would you know? Snapped Nanny. You were the talk of the whole village, said Granny. And you were too. They called you the Ice Maiden. Never knew that, did you? Sneered Nanny. I wouldn't sully my lips by saying what they called you, shouted Granny. Oh, yes, shrieked Nanny. Well, let me tell you, my good woman. Don't you dare talk to me in that tone of voice. I'm not anyone's good woman. Right! There was another silence while they stared at one another, nose to nose. But this silence was a whole quantum level of animosity higher than the last one. You could have roasted a turkey in the heat of this silence. There was no more shouting. Things had got far too bad for shouting. Now the voices came in low and full of menace. I should have known better than to listen to Magrat, growled Granny. This coven business is ridiculous. It attracts entirely the wrong sort of people. I'm very glad we had this little talk, hissed Nanny Og. Cleared the air. She looked down. And you're in my territory, madam. Madam! Thunder rolled in the distance. The permanent Lancre storm, after a trip through the foothills, had drifted back toward the mountains for a one-night stand. The last rays of sunset shone livid through the clouds, and fat drops of water began to thud on the witches' pointed hats. I really don't have time for all this, snapped Granny, trembling. I have far more important things to do. And me, said Nanny. Good night to you. And you. They turned their backs on one another and strode away into the downpour. Fights between friends, associates. Irma says, tensions. 8:15. The midnight rain drummed on Magrat's curtained windows as she thumbed her way purposefully through Goody Whemper's books of what, for want of any better word, could be called natural magic. The old woman had been a great collector of such things, and, most unusually, had written them down. Witches didn't normally have much use for literacy. But book after book was filled with tiny, meticulous handwriting, detailing the results of patient experiments in applied magic. Goody Whemper had, in fact, been a research witch. Footnote. Someone has to do it. It's all very well calling for Eye of Newt, but do you mean common, spotted, or great crested? Which eye, anyway? Will tapioca do just as well? If we substitute egg white, will the spell A, work, B, fail, or C, melt the bottom out of the cauldron? Goody Whemper's curiosity about such things was huge and insatiable. Footnote the second. Nearly insatiable. It was probably satiated in her last flight to test whether a broomstick could survive having its bristles pulled out one by one in midair. According to the small black raven she had trained as a flight recorder, the answer was almost certainly no. Would that be a black bok? I'm sorry. Doesn't even really make sense, does it? Ravens don't go bok, do they? Sharkies liked it. Farmos feels like that's a bit of a stretch, though. All right. End of footnotes footnote, as well as end of footnote. Books, Brews, and Booze is rating with a party of 19. Holy moly. Hey, everybody. We're reading Wyrd Sisters and just got to the end of a footnote. It's a books raid. Oh boy. How's everyone doing? Welcome, everyone. I love the coming in with the raid and the heart emoji. Oh no, hide the books. That holds up, yeah. Oh boy, we got Tiger Lily, Infosar, Ranal Kendi. I'm definitely mispronouncing that, I'm sorry. Twa-fwa-wa. Sharky say, don't worry, the books are chained to the shelves. Only the really dangerous ones. Yeah, if you haven't been here before, I am currently reading Wyrd Sisters by Sir Terry Pratchett. We're on page 98 right now. Or 99, actually. We're on page 99. Look at that. Hallow Thorn, hello. Woo. Books, Brews, and Brews thinks I actually got it right. You stumbled through 3 different pronunciations. Oh boy. Just so everyone knows, so at my time right now it's 8:20, so I'm planning on going for about another 25 minutes before I have to head out because I've got tickets to see Doctor Strange tonight. So I'm gonna have to end things in about 25 minutes. But I'm gonna keep going until then. Right now we have a witch, Magrat, looking through a book of spells. So many epic streamers here. Hallowthorn and Infosar are magicians who stream on Twitch. That's cool. That's not something I would have considered checking out. You need to go get your copy. We are currently on page 99. Alright, I'm going to start reading again, but thank you for everyone showing up, and thank you for the follows. Magrat. So our witch Magrat recently had an encounter with the castle fool. It was a very brief encounter. It was pretty awkward. About 2 words were exchanged. Magrat was looking up love spells. Every time she shut her eyes, she saw a red and yellow figure on the darkness inside. Something had to be done about it. She shut the book with a snap and looked at her notes. First, she had to find out his name. The old peel the apple trick should do that. You just peeled an apple, getting one length of peel, and threw the peel behind you. It'd land in the shape of his name. Millions of girls had tried it, and had inevitably been disappointed, unless the loved one was called Scs. SCSCS. That was because they hadn't used an unripe sunset wonder, picked 3 minutes before noon on the first frosty day in the autumn, and peeled left-handedly using a silver knife with a blade less than half an inch wide. Goody Wemper, her former teacher, had done a lot of experimenting and was quite explicit on the subject. Magrat always kept a few by for emergencies, and this probably was one. Sensia Kettner, recognizing the Rincewind Wizard hat. We also have some fan art here featuring it. That's because there's been kind of a running joke that the sound that magic makes is honk. So we've got our magic goose here. An untitled goose wizard. Bookspurs and Booze asks, why do fools fall in love? Nice. Sharkies, have we actually been told how old Magrat is other than young? I feel like she is not that young, because you say you feel like it was very middle schoolish. I don't think she's that young, but I think she's probably, I would guess, mid-20s, but in that sort of, her only experience with romance is through romance novels kind of way, where she maybe feels like she's in middle school. Farmos tried looking it up and doesn't think it ever says. She took a deep breath and threw the peel over her shoulder. She turned slowly. I'm a witch, she told herself. This is just another spell. There's nothing to be frightened of. Get a grip of yourself, girl. Woman. She looked down and bit the back of her hand out of nervousness and embarrassment. Who'd have thought it? She said aloud. It had worked. She turned back to her notes, her heart fluttering. What was next? Ah, yes. Gathering fern seed in a silk handkerchief at dawn. Goody Wemper's tiny handwriting went on for 2 pages of detailed botanical instructions, which, if carefully followed, resulted in the kind of love potion that had to be kept in a tightly stoppered jar at the bottom of a bucket of iced water. Magrat pulled open her back door. The thunder had passed, but now the first gray light of the new day was drowned in a steady drizzle. But it still qualified as dawn, and Magrat was determined. Brambles tugging at her dress, her hair plastered against her head by the rain, she set out into the dripping forest. The trees shook, even without a breeze. Sharky say, even the potion needs a cold shower. What is the... Oh, little blinky anime girl emoji. I feel like I need to summon the puppy, since there's all these new people here. Although, now I'm out of focus. Maybe I'll wait for the camera to decide it wants to focus up again. Trying once. Hey, camera. Back here. Hey, it worked. Binabic. Oh, can anybody hear that clicking noise? Oh, I see movement. Oh, there's the puppy. Oh, look at that waggy tail. Oh, you okay? You having a bit of a hiccup? You want a treat? Make sure. This is Binabic. He's the real star of the show, of course. Right? Binabic, or Bin for short, or Binakegabinic for long, or Binakegabinic Theodore Goodpuppy for really long. He's just a little guy. You got an itchy ear? You got an itchy back? Okay, where was I? The trees shook even without a breeze. Nanny Og was also out early. Nanny Og being the second of our 3 witches, depending on how you want to count it. She hadn't been able to get any sleep anyway, and besides, she was worried about Grebo. Grebo is her cat, who has recently, unbeknownst to Nanny, been trapped in the castle by the ghost of a dead king, trying to get a witch's attention. She was worried about Grebo. Grebo was one of her few blind spots. While intellectually she would concede that he was indeed a fat, cunning, evil-smelling, multiple rapist. This is the cat we're talking about. She nevertheless instinctively pictured him as the small fluffy kitten he had been decades before. The fact that he had once chased a female wolf up a tree and seriously surprised a she-bear who had been innocently digging for roots didn't stop her worrying that something bad might happen to him. It was generally considered by everyone else in the kingdom that the only thing that might slow Grebo down was a direct meteorite strike. Now she was using a bit of elementary magic to follow his trail. Although anyone with a sense of smell could have managed it. It had led her through the damp streets and to the open gates of the castle. She gave the guards a nod as she went through. It didn't occur to either of them to stop her because witches, like beekeepers and big gorillas, went where they liked. Like beekeepers and big gorillas. Oh boy. In any case, an elderly lady banging a bowl with a spoon was probably not the spearhead of an invasion force. Life as a castle guard in Lancre was extremely boring. One of them, leaning on his spear as Nanny went past, wished there could be some excitement in his life. He will shortly learn the error of his ways. The other guard pulled himself together and saluted. "Mornin', Mum," Morning, our Sean, said Nanny, and set off across the inner courtyard. The Sharkies wonder if that's a dig at beekeepers with a personal story behind it. Like all witches, Nanny Og had an aversion to front doors. She went around the back and entered the keep via the kitchens. A couple of maids curtsied to her. So did the head housekeeper, whom Nanny Og vaguely recognized as a daughter-in-law, although she couldn't remember her name. And so it was that when Lord Felmet came out of his bedroom, he saw, coming along the passage toward him, a witch. There was no doubt about it. From the tip of her pointed hat to her boots, she was a witch. And she was coming for him. Pharma says, or maybe you just don't want to detain beekeepers since they may be following bees. Maybe. Or they may have bees about them. I never introduced myself. I'm Sleet. Hi, everybody. I don't know. I'm just not in the habit, I guess. I assume everybody sees the channel, Sleet Reads, and realizes that I'm Sleet that reads. Hi. It's 8:30, just passed. It's another 15 minutes or so. Magrat slid helplessly down a bank. She was soaked to the skin and covered in mud. Somehow, she thought bitterly, when you read these spells, you always think of it being a fine sunny morning in late spring. And she had forgotten to check what bloody kind of bloody fern it bloody was. A tree tipped a load of raindrops onto her. Magrat pushed her sodden hair out of her eyes and sat down heavily on a fallen log, from which grew great clusters of pale and embarrassing fungus. It had seemed such a lovely idea. She'd had great hopes of the coven. She was sure it wasn't right to be a witch alone. You could get funny ideas. She'd dreamed of wise discussions of natural energies while a huge moon hung in the sky. And then possibly they'd try a few of the old dances described in some of Goody Wemper's books. Not actually naked, or sky-clad, as it was rather delightfully called, because Magrat had no illusions about the shape of her own body, and the older witches seemed solid across the hems. And anyway, that wasn't absolutely necessary. The books said that the old-time witches had sometimes danced in their shifts. Magrat had wondered about how you danced in shifts. Perhaps there wasn't room for them all to dance at once, she'd thought. The joke is that shift is referring to an undergarment. Kind of like a nightgown, maybe. But shearer, probably. Not shifts as in, like, working in shifts. That's the joke. What she hadn't expected was a couple of crotchety old women who were barely civil at the best of times and simply didn't enter into the spirit of things. Oh, they'd been kind to the baby in their own way, but she couldn't help feeling that if a witch was kind to someone, it was entirely for deeply selfish reasons. Farmo says, I get jokes, and the Sharkies say it's basically like a long undershirt. Yeah. And when they did magic, they made it look as ordinary as housekeeping. They didn't wear any occult jewelry. Magrat was a great believer in occult jewelry. It was all going wrong. She was going home. She stood up, wrapped her damp dress around her, and set off through the misty woods. Books, Brews, and Booze playing chat catch-up. You assumed Magrat was in her early 20s. What do y'all think? That's roughly what I was saying, like early to mid-20s. But, like, the way she's acting in this book is kind of, middle school love kind of thing. And I think that that's just because it's her first run by with romance. And, her only other experience is romance novels, basically. Yeah, I was picturing somewhere in her 20s. Maybe even veering into, like, past 25. Maybe she's, like, 27 even. She's just, inexperienced with people. But probably, yeah, early to mid-20s. That's my guess. She stood up, wrapped her damp dress around her, and set off through the misty woods. And heard the running feet. Someone was coming through them at high speed, without caring who heard him, and, over the top of the sound of breaking twigs, was a curious dull jingling. Who could it be? Magrat sidled behind a dripping holly bush and peered cautiously through the leaves. Oh, books, Brews, and Booze. You missed, there's been a second appearance of the Standing Stone, your favorite character. Oh. Alright. I was mistaken. The jingling noise was not the fool. It was Sean, the youngest of Nanny Ogg's sons, and the metal noise was caused by his suit of chainmail, which was several sizes too big for him. Lancre is a poor kingdom, and over the centuries the chainmail of the palace guards has had to be handed down from one generation to another, often on the end of a long stick. This one made him look like a bulletproof bloodhound. She stepped out in front of him. "Is that you, Miss Magrat?" said Sean, raising the flap of mail that covered his eyes. "It's ma'am." "What's happened to her?" "He's locked her up. Said she was coming to poison him. And I can't get down to the dungeons to see because there's all new guards. They say she's been put in chains." Sean frowned. "And that means something horrible's going to happen. You know what she's like when she loses her temper. We'll never hear the last of it, Miss." "Where were you going?" demanded Magrat. "To fetch our Jason and our Wayne and our Darren and our—" "Wait a moment." "Oh, Miss Magrat, suppose they try to torture her. You know what a tongue she's got on her when she gets angry." "I'm thinking," said Magrat. "He's put his own bodyguards on the gates and everything. Look, just shut up a minute, will you, Sean? When our Jason finds out, he's going to give the Duke a real seeing to, Miss. He says it's about time someone did." Nanny Ogg's Jason was a young man with the build, and, Magrat had always thought, the brains of a herd of oxen. Thick-skinned though he was, she doubted whether he could survive a hail of arrows. "Don't tell him yet," she said thoughtfully. "There could be another way." "I'll go and find Granny Weatherwax, shall I, Miss?" said Sean, hopping from one leg to another. "She'll know what to do. She's a witch." Magrat stood absolutely still. She had thought she was angry before, But now she was furious. She was wet and cold and hungry, and this person... Once upon a time, she heard herself thinking, she would have burst into tears at this point. "Oops," said Sean. I didn't mean... Whoops. He backed away. "If you happen to see Granny Weatherwax," said Magrat slowly, in tones that should have etched her words into glass, "you can tell her that I will sort it all out. Now go away before I turn you into a frog. You look like one anyway." She turned, hitched up her skirts, and ran like hell toward her cottage. Farmhouse says, "Rude," right? Let me just take a look at how long this next section is. Another 4-ish pages in 4-ish minutes. Let's do it. Books, Brews, and Booze says, "You tell him, Magrat." Right? That was a good response, I think. Maybe not thoroughly thought out, but, good nonetheless. There's been a little bit tonight of a falling out between the witches. Spoiler warning. Probably should have said the spoiler warning first. That's how it works, right? Sorry. Lord Felmet was one of nature's gloaters. He was good at it. "Quite comfortable, are we?" he said. Nannyog considered this. "Apart from these stalks, you mean?" she said. "I am impervious to your foul blandishments," said the Duke. "I scorn your devious wiles. You are to be tortured, I'll have you know." This didn't appear to have the required effect. Nanny was staring about the dungeon with the vaguely interested gaze of a sightseer. "And then you will be burned," said the Duchess. "Okay," said Nanny. "Okay? Well, it's bloody freezing down here. What's that big wardrobe thing with the spikes?" The Duke was trembling. "Ha-ha!" he said. "Now you realize, eh? That, my dear lady, is an Iron Maiden. It's the latest thing. Well may you... Can I have a go in it?" "Your pleas fall on deaf." The Duke's voice trailed off. His twitch started up. Farmo says blandishments is a good word. Oh no, I've been unfollowed because of the spoilers. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Books, Brews, and Brews loves Nanny Og so much. What's that with the spikes? That's an Iron Maiden. Can I have a go? The Duchess leaned forward until her big red face was inches away from Nanny's nose. "This insouciance gives you pleasure," she hissed. "But soon you will laugh on the other side of your face." "It's only got this side," said Nanny. The Duchess fingered a tray of implements lovingly. "We shall see," she said, picking up a pair of pliers. "And you need not think any others of your people will come to your aid," said the Duke, who was sweating despite the chill. "We alone hold the keys to this dungeon. Ha, ha. You will be an example to all those who have been spreading malicious rumors about me. Do not protest your innocence. I hear the voices all the time, lying." The Duchess gripped him ferociously by the arm. "Enough," she rasped. "Come, Lionel. We will let her reflect on her fate for a while. Bookspurs and Booze is thinking of the time in Bill and Ted where they find an Iron Maiden in medieval times and do an air guitar in excitement. I was going to say I need to rewatch those. I haven't seen the newest one. But I don't know if I do need to rewatch those. I should. It's been a long time. All right. Oh, geez. It's 8:46. Let me just finish this bit. The faces. The wicked lies. I wasn't there. And anyway, he fell. My porridge, all salty, murmured the Duke, swaying. The door slammed behind them. There was a click of locks and a thudding of bolts. Nanny was left alone in the gloom. A flickering torch high on the wall only made the surrounding darkness more forbidding. Strange metal shapes, designed for no more exalted purpose than the destruct testing of the human body, cast unpleasant shadows. Nanny Ogg stirred in her chains. "All right," she said. "I can see you. Who are you?" King Verence stepped forward. I think I'm going to stop there. That seems like a good place, and I kind of do need to end the stream, sadly, because I'm going to run out of time. I've got deadlines here. I've got to go pick someone up and then get to the theater. But Books, Brews, and Booze, thank you very much for the raid. That's fun having all these people show up. Hopefully some folks stuck around and had fun. I do this every Wednesday and Friday at 7 p.m. Pacific time. Whatever that translates to for everybody else. And Pharma says he's going to go see a sorcerer instead of witches. Maybe one witch. Yeah, at least one witch. Chucky say, have a good movie theater time. Yeah. Gonna wear a mask throughout. But yeah, every Wednesday and Friday. So I'll be back next Wednesday. And if you want to catch up on anything you've missed, other than, I guess Twitch probably has video on demand, whatever the VODs. But otherwise, I post everything on YouTube. All these streams go up under the same name, Sleet Reads. So if you want to catch up on this book or The Hobbit or Guards or some of the Belgariad. We've read the first 2 books of the Belgariad by David Eddings. Those are all up on YouTube's. But yeah. Thanks, everyone. I hope everyone has a lovely evening. And I am really running out of time, so I've got to go. So have a good weekend, and I'll see you next Wednesday. Bye.